Welcome to the Opening Line Report here on Vegas Insider. Kevin Rogers with you, and we've reached week 15 of the NFL season, and a lot of games to go over. You have San Francisco, Seattle kicking things off on Thursday, 3 games on Saturday, and then a big card coming up on Sunday. And we're going to hit on some of the highlights here with Patrick Everson, who joins us every Monday in this spot. Patrick, of course, covers the beat. He's on the floor. He's in the casinos. He talks to the sharps. He talks to the odds makers. He talks to everybody. And he's joining us now. Patrick, good to have you back on. And before we look ahead to week 15, just a quick recap of what unfolded in week 14 and who ended up winning in week 14. Was it the books or was it the players?
I think you got a mixed bag. I think the books ultimately ended up a little bit ahead. But the way some of those results came down were there was some favorable results that could be found for both sides of this equation, which is nice that the bettors get a little back. One that I know the books were lamenting a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, was that late Cowboys touchdown, because a lot of the public and recreational bettors like to throw 17-point favorites on their moneyline parlay cards as kind of a free space. That's how Chris Andrews at South Point always describes it. And they did. So they were looking at a really, the bookmakers were looking at a potentially really nice win if the Texans had held on to win that game outright. But rather it went the other way. I thought it was interesting. There were a couple of books that did pretty well to the Bengals winning and covering. There was a lot of, as Chris Andrews at South Point described it, but this was multiple books, a lot of late steam on the Browns, a lot of late sharp play on the Browns heading up to kickoff that moved that line significantly. So the Bengals winning and covering ended up being a good result, which is interesting because the Bengals are, arguably the hottest team in the league, and especially against the number, they've been fantastic. So interesting that the late money came in, the late sharp money crashing in on the Browns, thinking there was some value there.
Now let's look ahead to this week, Patrick, and we get it going Thursday. 49ers and the Seahawks, big one inside of the NFC West, and obviously San Francisco dealing with a third quarterback this year, but it's worked out for Brock Purdy. I'm not going to call him 2-0, but at least 1-0 because he played most of the Dolphin game, didn't start. Jimmy G started that game. But look, I'm not going to say Purdy's better than Tom Brady, but San Francisco put up a great effort on Sunday. They destroyed Tampa Bay. The Bucs in the short week did not look good going out to Northern California, and the Niners keep on rolling here. Now they go to Seattle Thursday night, a chance to win the NFC West and kind of put this thing away, up 2 games. The Seahawks are 0-4 against the spread. The last 4 games, they lose to Carolina on Sunday. What are you seeing with the San Francisco-Seattle game to begin week 15?
Yeah, this is interesting, and I went back and forth with Casey Degnan. He's an oddsmaker, risk supervisor at the Superbook. Went back and forth with him on Sunday night. And what he noted was that last week on the look ahead line, they opened this game 49ers -1 because of, as you noted, the uncertainty at QB. He said Purdy looked solid enough against the Bucs, and I thought he looked quite solid, honestly. He said that we felt like this line had to be higher when they reopened it. So they did open it higher. They opened it at 49ers -3, and they got mostly San Francisco money right out of the gate. On Sunday, they initially went to 3 -120, but by late last night, it popped up to Niners -3.5. So, people are definitely still liking what they see in San Francisco. San Francisco has been a popular play the last month on, not only on the week to week, but in the futures markets, the Super Bowl futures market and so forth. And after people saw what they saw yesterday, they may want to jump back on. I think there was some concern, but San Francisco keeps rolling. Now they've got the Deebo Samuel situation to deal with here, another injury, but they took care of business against the Bucs. They just absolutely torched them, and that line's already up 0.5 point. Total is up a point. I believe it's up a point as well. I'm going to double check this. What it's saying this morning here. Yeah, still you got Niners 3.5. Niners 3.5 even money now. It was 3.5 flat last night. Total up a point, 42.5 to 43.5.
When these teams played back in week 2, Patrick, San Francisco rolled them, and you figured that was going to be the letdown for the Seahawks after they beat Russell Wilson and the Broncos in week 1 of that Monday night, kind of their Super Bowl in a sense to start the season. There were no expectations for Seattle; they weren't going to be good. and now they're in the playoff mix. I know they've gone backwards of late. In that game, Trey Lance started. He got hurt. Garoppolo came in, and they ended up rolling past Seattle. Is there value in the Seahawks here? And understandably, they've kind of gone backwards, which we expected, but home favorite against Carolina, lost outright. They've been a favorite. Oh, against the Raiders, they lost that game in overtime in the Josh Jacobs touchdown. But now you're getting Seattle with some points at home. We've seen them successful in that spot. You think people want to jump on that angle?
I think people potentially should jump on that angle. You've got a short week. It's not a long trip for San Francisco by any stretch, but still, it's a short week. Seattle really needs to pull it together here to keep themselves in that NFC playoff picture after all the work they'd done earlier in the season to insert themselves into that conversation. So I don't think it's a bad spot at all. I kind of like, if you like Seattle, you should like that this has gone to 3.5. Like I said, it went to 3.5 flat. Now it's 3.5 even money. So, early in the week, but sort of showing that maybe 3.5 is a little bit of a resistance point. And if it is, you may want to, try to get the hook there. I might be tempted. I somewhat tempted. I just don't know because the Niners defense has been great. The offense does what it needs to do. There's just talent all over the place on offense. It's hard to go against them, but 3.5 is certainly tempting. And with the situation Seattle's in, I might get frisky and throw a little on the Seahawks money line.
Yeah, and Brock Purdy making his first road start.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
at Seattle, which is a tough place to play. Which
the
can
12th
be
man, Patrick, is still an underrated thing. People think the Seahawks, they've dropped off, and yeah, they're not what they were. Not an elite team. It's still a tough place to go there, and making your first road start, it won't be easy. So now we go to Saturday night, and what a road trip for the Dolphins. They lose to the Niners. Tua struggles against the Chargers Sunday night. Herbert looks good in that game. So the Dolphins go from 8-3 to 8-5, maybe 8-6 now with Buffalo Saturday. Short turnaround after they were in California for 2 weeks. Bills revenge angle after losing to the Dolphins in week 3. Bills held off the Jets on Sunday. Bills right now around a 7.5-point favorite. What are you hearing with this game?
Yeah, this is interesting. You're right. This is just a brutal stretch of games for the Dolphins to send them to the West Coast, where they smartly stayed last week between games between the Niners and the Chargers. That's the thing to do. But, 2 tough opponents. They lose both games. And now they got to go to Buffalo. And I'm hearing the weather might be a little uncooperative next Saturday night as well, which is how it goes in Buffalo in December. You're generally not going to get the kind of weather you'd like, certainly the kind of weather that a team based in Miami would like. Just a really tough spot. This was interesting. The Superbook opened 6.5, but what they do at the Superbook and what they do at some other books is they'll get these numbers up Sunday afternoon for the following week's games. But if you're playing in the Sunday night game, then as soon as that game kicks off, the subsequent week's game comes off the board. So this Dolphins-Bills game, as soon as Dolphins-Chargers kicked off, the game came off the board. So there was no movement prior to that. And it opened at the Superbook, Bills 6.5, total 45. And what Casey said is even before the Sunday night game kicked off, because Miami has been a pretty popular play of late, people enjoy betting on fun teams. Miami got a couple of pops at plus 6.5, and then the game came off the board. The game goes back up today, and it's up. Even though Miami got a couple early pops, it goes back up today at Bills 7, and it's Bills 7 minus 120 furthermore. So Bills minus 7 kind of starting to lean maybe toward 7.5. So, if you got on the Bills last night, good on you, because I don't see this going back to 6.5 necessarily with the position the Dolphins are in. But I mean, it's a possibility, sure. But definitely a really tough spot. Like I said, a little bit of early action before it came down, but now it's back up today. And I think, with this number the way it is, this was something that happened last week too. The Bills will be obviously a popular money line parlay play, definitely a popular teaser play and so forth too.
What about the total, Patrick? Yesterday, Jets, Bills, ugly weather and nearly scoreless throughout most of the first half, still comfortably stayed under. It's not going to get nicer, like you said. Saturday night, Buffalo, New York, mid-December, and the Dolphins during this road trip They have 4 touchdowns, all on 4 big plays. They had the crazy Tyreek Hill fumble return, and then Tua hit him on a long pass, but no sustained drives for the Dolphins. So this offense is not hitting its stride at the wrong time. Right now, it's not looking good, but Buffalo's probably going to grind it out. So you think people are going to look at the total maybe and try to lean under?
Oh, I think they are, and this has been the real big mover early on. Again, Superbook takes this game down after the Dolphins Chargers game begins last night, but they opened this 45, and they were a little hesitant on that. And they even felt like they were opening a little bit low because they had already looked ahead and saw that there was potential for some snow Saturday night and so forth. We're several days out. A lot could change between now and then. But what Casey Degnan of the Superbook said, it's a little lower than anticipated because of that potential weather. Well, now today, looking at it, the Superbook's at 42. I assume everybody else is probably sitting in that same range. Well, I see some 43s and it's a 43 and a half. So Superbook is down to 42 already. So, I think people are hitting, probably took a few pops on that on the under. And I don't know how much lower it gets, but already down to 42 from a 45 opener at the Superbook.
Now let's take a look at one of the late afternoon games on Sunday. The Bengals and the Buccaneers. Cincinnati has been fantastic, Patrick. They were 0-2. They're 9-2 the last 11 games. And they did not have the letdown on Sunday. I thought they'd have the letdown against Cleveland, a team that Burrow had struggled against. And he wasn't great, but he was able to do what he needed to do. The Bengals won that game. They're tied with the Ravens atop the AFC North. Now Cincinnati travels down to Tampa. They face Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, who were awful on Sunday. I think Brady will be the first one to admit that. But now you're getting the Buccaneers as a home dog. Second straight week, they'll be an underdog after being a favorite all year long. What are you hearing? Are people trying to back Brady at home, or are they saying, no, we've had enough of this guy? Tampa Bay is not a good team. Cincinnati's a quality team. Let's go with the Bengals. What are you hearing with that?
I think it's probably the latter. What Casey Degnan, again at the Superbook, said right out of the gate on Sunday night, he said it's been one-way traffic with the Bengals. He said no surprise based on how they looked against the Browns. And as you said, it looked like a letdown spot, and there was a lot of late sharp play that came in on the Browns on that game, and ended up getting denied with Cincinnati winning and covering. But he said based on how Cincy looked on Sunday against the Browns, parlayed with the Bucs laying an egg, just getting absolutely drilled by the Niners. They opened 3. They went to 3.5 in pretty short order on Sunday night, and I'm checking now just to see exactly where we're sitting as you and I talk on Monday afternoon your time. Yeah, still 3.5 flat. But already up a half a point on the Bengals. And to your point, the Bengals have just been phenomenal. They've won 5 in a row straight up, 7-1 straight up in their last 8. They've cashed 10 of their last 11. They've had 2, I believe, if I recall correctly, they've had 2 5-game point spread runs sandwiched around 1 point spread loss. So they've just been phenomenal, not only on the field, but really for bettors. And bettors are certainly, taking a look at this game early and giving a little support to Cincinnati with that line up a half a point. Yeah,
this Tampa Bay team, Patrick, I mean, should have lost to the Saints Monday night. The Rams game should have lost. And I know that we look at this in gambling and say things even out. I believe things even out. But Tampa Bay, they've had games they've come back and won. There haven't been a lot of games that they've necessarily blown. That games that they have won, they pretty much have won from the outset. Week 1 against Dallas, week 2 against New Orleans, and these other couple games that they've mixed in. But at the same time, they haven't really had these games they've blown. I feel like, you know what, they should be maybe in second place in this division. Look at the way Carolina has played, that Carolina can catch them. That are people still believing in Tampa Bay? Or are they saying, no, we got to give up on Brady. He's shot. There's no offense around him. The defense maybe a little suspect now. What are people saying with this Tampa Bay team?
I think they do feel that way, and obviously the results on the field, completely bear that out. They've just been terrible, and it's only because the rest of the NFC South in general has been awful. Every team is under 500. Tampa had 6-7 straight up, 3-9-1 against the spread. Just dismal spread team, one of the worst in the league. And it's interesting now. I didn't realize this till after everything, all the dust settled yesterday, but that that Carolina apparently controls its own destiny in that division. So, which is just crazy when you think about where this season has been for Carolina with firing its coach and letting Christian McCaffrey go, and Baker Mayfield didn't end up being their guy, and Baker Mayfield just performed miracles for the Rams to come back against the Raiders. But it was the Raiders. The Raiders are always going to Raider at some point. It's definitely fascinating. I don't see anything in this matchup that makes me think, you know what, I need to be on Tom Brady here. They're going to put it together this week. I don't know if I play the Bengals necessarily either, because I feel like just kind of the law of averages has got to come into play here. But man, the defending AFC champions are playing well. They're getting things done on the field and at the betting window.
Now, this game, you talk about fascinating. This game is so interesting. Also, in the late window on Sunday, Patrick, is this Titans-Chargers game. Mm-hmm. Number one, LA wins as a home underdog Sunday night against Miami. And the Chargers, we know, don't have a great home field advantage. I don't know how well Tennessee is going to travel out there. But the Titans started the season 0-2, went on this great run. They had this nice cushion in the AFC South. Somehow they put up a stinker against Jacksonville on Sunday. Third straight loss for the Titans, 0-3 against the spread in that spot. And for Tennessee was covering, it felt like every single week. Now you get the Titans as a dog. You get the Chargers as a favorite. What are you hearing with this game? Because I look at this saying, wow, maybe this is a spot to back Tennessee, but now there's some respect for the Chargers.
Yeah, absolutely. And this line has gone up a little bit. It's another situation like that, the Dolphins-Bills game, where because the Chargers were playing in the Sunday night game last night for week 14, that it wasn't on the board for very long at the Superbook before it came down once the Dolphins-Chargers game started. But Superbook opened 2.5, didn't see too much activity, didn't move any numbers on Sunday night before taking it down with the start of the Dolphins-Chargers game. But Casey did say there were some smaller bets on Chargers and over, nothing noteworthy enough to move the numbers. However, today, as you go back and look at this, it is up to 3 Chargers at the Superbook after LA gets a good win over the Miami Dolphins. Total at 46, and the total is actually down a point, open 47 down to 46, but the spread up a half a point in favor of the Chargers, and I can see it. I mean, look, I thought Herbert looked great last night. I had Chargers money line. I thought that was a good play. I felt like the Chargers, I mean, it was more of a gut play. It wasn't like I did a bunch of analytics or anything. I just felt like, you know what, the Chargers really need to win this week. So I felt like that was a good play, but that's a decent team, a good team that coming into the season was kind of a trending flavor in the futures book, whether it was for AFC or for Super Bowl or for over on their win total, etc. And then just, they've been banged up. They've been really beat up with injuries, and they pulled it together last night. And to your point in that game last night, really the fluke play, if you discount that completely, fluke play from Tyreek Hill. And then, Miami was having a hard time getting plays in positive territory on the other side of the 50. So, it looks to me like the Chargers are starting to put it together here. And this is definitely a tough spot for the Titans with being in a little bit of a glut. They were on fire. They were on fire heading into that Cincy game. Those were 2 of the hottest teams in the league. And they were both playing well against the spread. And since he has continued to do so, the Titans have regressed since then, and now face a tough chore against a Los Angeles team that looks like it's getting it together.
And also a couple of notes on this game, Patrick. Tennessee, they better watch out because Jacksonville's lurking now. Nobody would have said that a few weeks ago. They still got to play each other coming up. I know Jacksonville against Dallas this week, which is not an easy task, but Tennessee better watch out because they don't want to go on this extended losing streak and then lose their spot atop the AFC South. But with the Chargers, they're 0-3 against the spread. Their last 3 as a home favorite. So they covered against the Chiefs. They covered against the Dolphins and won outright, but lost outright to Seattle, barely beat the Broncos in overtime, lost to Jacksonville. I know Herbert was hurt in that game, but the Chargers, kind of like, how much faith do you have now laying points at home? All of a sudden that the role is flipped.
No, it's a really good point. And it's funny because the sharp guys love betting the Chargers when they're dogs, whether home or on the road. They have the last couple of seasons. That's something that John Murray at the Superbook has reiterated over the past couple of seasons. If they're a dog, home or away, the sharp guys kind of like them. But when the Chargers have to start laying points, that for whatever reason, that's when they start getting flaky, even in games where they probably ought to be laying points, in games where they probably should be going out and getting the job done. So, yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a different spot for the Chargers. I don't necessarily mind the 2.5, but once you get to 3, or if somehow it gets beyond, then I think it gets even a little bit more suspect. So I could certainly understand if you didn't want to just off one performance on Sunday Night Football put all your eggs in the Chargers basket. I think they still have more that they need to prove to show that they're a playoff caliber team or anything beyond a deep run kind of team.
So this Sunday night, the Giants and Commanders part 2 after they tied in part 1. So thank you, NBC, for flexing this into the Sunday night rotation. And Washington, Patrick, playing the Giants for a second straight game. Not the case with the Giants because the Commanders had the bye in between, but they get New York, tie, bye, and then New York again coming up on Sunday in D.C. And the Giants coming off a loss where they were just obliterated by the Eagles on Sunday at MetLife Stadium. But that first matchup, Patrick, between the Giants and the Commanders, Washington jumped out to a quick 10-0 lead. Giants came back, took the lead, led in the fourth. Washington tied it, and then teams had the opportunity in overtime. Graham Gano missed that long field goal, so you get the tie, which really, both teams felt unsatisfied after that. But now Washington, still in that playoff race in the NFC, they need this win desperately. I know the Giants do too, but I think the Giants will run out of steam eventually. But Washington, they've been pretty good against the spread. Didn't cover, obviously, that Giants game. But what's the latest here with this Commanders-Giants game on Sunday night?
Yeah, Washington gets a little breather, gets the very late bye. And that 20-20 tie actually ended a 6-0-1 point spread run for the Commanders, still 6-1-1 in their last 8, which is plenty to write home about. If you rode those 8 games, that's you made a little money for sure. But again, Casey Degnan at the Superbook, what he said about this is, to your point, obviously playoff implications cause the NFL to flex this game in. Great job by the NFL, by the way, flexing in that Dolphins-Chargers game and flexing in this game. But he said due to a couple of smaller bets early on the Giants, and I'm going to assume that's sharp play. And he said, along with the market making some adjustments as well, this game opened 5 at the Superbook, went down to 4.5, Commanders 5. And they saw some Giants money, so they went down to 4.5. Saw a little bit of money on the over initially as well, which opened at 40. I'm going to see if they adjusted off that today. No, they stuck at 40. It didn't move them last night, hasn't moved them today. But the spread remains 4.5 today off a little bit of early sharp Giants play on Sunday night. And obviously the Giants are starting to put themselves in a tougher position after really getting off to a great start this season. And Washington is just trying to keep it rolling. They've been that NFC East is it's quite interesting. All these teams and all these teams being in the playoff hunt in the NFC East, and the Eagles just continuing to get it done, just absolutely shellacked the Giants on Sunday.
I mean, now, Patrick, look, you rarely see the in division rivals. It's either get the sweep or the split. Now it's just win one game with the tie. You throw that out. Giants are 7-5-1, Commanders 7-5-1. So this is literally win and not advance, but win, you're in a good spot. Lose, yes, you're in big trouble. The loser down to 7-6-1, losing that head-to-head tiebreaker. So that's how big of a game this is Sunday night.
No, absolutely. It's a really big game. And like it makes it even, the playoff implications are excellent to, an excellent reason alone to flex these in. A Washington team that, look, I didn't see much of that Giants game. It sounds like it wasn't the Commanders Giants game part 1, as you said. So I can't speak to that, but I've seen a couple of Washington games this year, and to me, that's been a fun team to watch. So I think this is a great spot, great implications. Hopefully they come out and give us an entertaining game that gets a result rather than a tie. But yeah, the loser of this is definitely going to find itself in a tough position trying to advance and stay in that NFC playoff picture.
Well, also to a couple other little numbers in this game. Giants 4-0 against the AFC. So that hurts you in tiebreaker implications. Obviously, if the Giants beat Washington, then they'll have the head-to-head. But also New York 0-3-1 in the division. So there's a lot of things that are going against New York in this spot. But 9-4 against the spread. And we look at the top teams in the NFC. Patrick, it's New York. It's Detroit. Those are the two best teams in the NFC covering numbers. And the best team in the NFL covering numbers is a team that went 0-2 against the spread the first 2 weeks, the Cincinnati Bengals. So you'll figure that one out.
That's the NFL for you, man.
You know what? You just can't figure this out. I mean, it's as simple as that. You cannot figure out this league. It's crazy. Before we get to the Monday night game, just because I brought them up, I want your thoughts on this one, the Detroit Lions. So they cover again on Sunday. They win. They beat Minnesota. A lot of people said, oh, what happened? Oh, let's go to that first before we get to the Jet game. The thought of, well, the Lions, they're favored against the Vikings. How can they be favored? They're under 500. Minnesota's atop the division. I like Detroit. I thought that said everything, and Detroit was in control of that whole game. Did you back any of did you talk to any of the sharps that were backing Minnesota kind of on principle, or they said, no, the line says Detroit, so we're going to back Detroit?
Yeah, there was one sharp bet that I talked to every week in Las Vegas, and he was on Detroit right away. I think there was either, it might have been a look ahead or just very, very briefly as this opened, depending on where you shop, where you could have gotten the Lions at pick. He was on the Lions pick, and I think he said he took them again. I think he even said he took them at 2.5. It was either 1.5 or 2.5. And so he was on them twice. He loved the Lions last week. So that was, even though, and I think at some books, the Vikings even opened a short favorite, but that number jumped the fence in pretty short order. And in fact, I'm going back. He shot me a message on this. He definitely, it was his, it was his play, really his play of the week. He said the team is loaded on offense with weapons all over. Minnesota defense is shaky and should be exposed. This is what he said a week ago. So, and the Minnesota defense definitely got exposed. And he said it was currently the only game I really like. And that's what he told me midweek last week. It was just the one game he really liked. And I back up on that. He said he took him at pick, but he loved that game. So, the odds makers got this, moved to get this right in a hurry, which generally means that the sharp guys are betting and helping the odds makers get their number where it ought to be for this game, which was the Lions being favored. And as the week went on, I heard more and more people were like, how are the Lions favored here? They're 5-7. The Vikings are 10-2. Well, people know. And the Lions went out and proved it. Like you said, they were in control of that game all the way. So definitely a situation where I think there were sharp guys, at least early on, that definitely like the Lions.
Quickly on this game, Patrick, 6 straight covers for Detroit after they beat Minnesota, should have beat Buffalo on Thanksgiving. I mean, they were right there in that game. But this Jets team, who's now lost a few in a row, they're kind of in both teams in desperation mode. Detroit dug themselves such a big hole to start the season that they need to win games. They can't just say, okay, it is like must win for both these teams the rest of the way. But the Jets, a slight favorite at home. We'll see if Mike White is healthy coming up. I'm sure Robert Saleh does not want to go back to Zach Wilson at all. If he's got to go to Flacco first instead of Zach Wilson, he'll do that. But do you keep riding Detroit here with this long streak of covering, or you say, okay, maybe this is the one? They've already won at MetLife once, so that means nothing for this one. They beat the Giants there. It means nothing. But do you keep riding the Lions here, or do you say, all right, the Jets now back at home where they haven't been as great, this is the time to back them?
I guess you see where Mike White is, but for starters. But, like I said, you got to think that maybe there's at least a little bit of law of averages here, perhaps a little regression for Detroit. Been playing really well of late. I think that's 5-1 straight up and 6-0 against the spread in their last 6. The Lions are. So, look, they're playing really well at the right time. But I just think that's a tough spot. Wait and see the injury report a little bit. Maybe let this flesh out a little bit more. But I can tell you early on, just some early splits coming out of DraftKings, and the ticket count is 2-1 plus on the Lions against the spread. The money much closer, but a little bit in favor of the Lions at 54% of money. So 68% of tickets, 54% of early money on the Lions, who are obviously the hot hand and need to keep winning. The Jets need to pull it back together, though, if the Jets are going to stay in this AFC playoff picture. So it's an interesting game. The injury report's probably going to be kind of key here.
Our last game we'll go over, Patrick, the Monday nighter, Rams and Packers at Lambeau Field. And, of course, like you said before, Baker Mayfield. We expected that, right? Get off the plane. You're in. And rally past the Raiders on Thursday night. And I'm going to assume, barring injury, that Sean McVay is going to stick with Baker Mayfield the rest of the way just because it's a better option than whatever else he has that was behind Matthew Stafford. And when you look at the Packers, they're off the bye. Aaron Rodgers, you think after the bye, maybe he's a little healthier. He's probably not 100%. But Green Bay here, heavy favorite at home, and they've proven nothing this year. And the Rams trying to avoid, that game looking like a fluke, which it probably was against the Raiders. But what's your reaction with this Packers-Rams game Monday?
Yeah, again, Casey Degnan at the Superbook said straight out of the gate on Sunday night, he said we've taken some straight bets on the Rams at +8, but they didn't move on Sunday night. However, this morning they have come down. They went down to Packers -7.5, so this is adjusted a half a point. And to your point, what have the Packers really done this season that proves themselves to be an 8-point favorite against anybody, even a Rams team that's struggled and has been beat up, and defending Super Bowl champions having the serious Super Bowl hangover, but of course injuries helping contribute to that. But really, that team was struggling before Kupp and Stafford got hurt too. But and then, like you said, Baker Mayfield leads this crazy win on Thursday night in Week 14. A comeback against the Raiders, 2 long late touchdown drives, and the Rams end up winning that game, which was just crazy. But again, they took a little bit of money on the Rams Sunday night, decided to move it this morning. Casey said he expects that Packers will be tied to a bunch of teasers and parlays sitting at that number. So he expects that the Superbook will be rooting for another Baker Mayfield primetime upset victory. I said not too much interest in the total as of Sunday night. That over-under opened at 40. It's actually down a tick to 39.5. I got to assume it's at least going to be really cold next Monday night in Green Bay. We'll see what other impacts the weather might have. You always got to keep an eye on that. But he thinks they'll need Baker again. And and the Rams get a mini bye here too. They get the full duration of a mini bye, playing in the Thursday night game and not having to come back until the subsequent Monday night game. So I'm not sure. If I were the Rams, I wouldn't send Cooper Kupp back out there at all. I don't think you've got any reason to do that. But I have seen a couple of articles that have intimated that maybe he does come back at some point this season. I think they should just let him completely heal up and reboot for next year. But that team, should certainly be a little healthier with the mini bye. And as you said, the Packers laying more than a touchdown against anybody. They haven't really shown us anything this season that would make me want to get on that.
Well, the other thing too, which is kind of funny, Patrick, when you think about this Rams team, and I agree with you. Don't send you're 4-9. Like, pack it in. Like, you're not going to make the playoffs. There's no reason to send your top offensive player out there again if he's not healthy.
Right.
Rams have covered 3 straight, and maybe this is one of these. There's a reason why this number is so big. You look back at Green Bay. I mean, again, these numbers are just so ugly here, Patrick, that as far as a substantial, I'm not going to say substantial favorite, just as a favorite, came back and won at Chicago, lost to Tennessee, lost at Detroit, lost at Washington, lost to the Jets, lost to the Giants, should have lost to Zappy and the Patriots in that game at Lambeau in overtime, did beat Chicago convincingly at home. And those are, as a favorite, like they can't cover. Most of those were outright losses. And now you got to lay this amount. But back to the Rams for a second. Not knowing about Matthew Stafford long term, I mean, we know he's not going to come back this season, but is Baker Mayfield the answer moving forward for this Rams team if he plays well the final month?
See, that's a really good question. And I hadn't even entertained that thought when the Rams got him off the waiver wire last week. But look, first off, the Raiders are playing way below their talent. They had won 3 in a row. They were getting it together. They were looking like, people thought they might look with the kind of talent that they have on that team. I mean, Josh Jacobs is just a beast, and Devontae Adams, an incredible receiver. But then they go and do things like this, and this is not unusual for the Raiders to go and do things like this. But that said, you've got to credit Mayfield. If I got this right, a 75-yard drive and a 98-yard drive to win the game in the fourth quarter against a team that was, for a team rather, that appeared just dead in the water. You got to wonder, to your point, you expect Mayfield will be out there this week and the rest of the season after that. and you wonder whether McVay is going to look at this and be like, Stafford is not the most durable player, and he's also up there in, he's up there in years too. He's not, he's not up there like Tom Brady. He's up there, but it's interesting. I think that's a question that McVay wants to see if Mayfield can answer for him. I think that's how I'll put it. I don't know if he's the answer, but look, the guy's got a ton of starts. Recall it was only, 2 seasons ago when, they were in, I believe, the divisional round at Buffalo. The Browns were, with Baker Mayfield at the helm. So it's not like the guy is, should necessarily be in the dustbin at this point. And what happened with the Rams and the Raiders game on Thursday night shows maybe he's got something there. So I think it's a question that that McVay is kind of hoping Mayfield can help answer, I guess.
So Green Bay, Patrick, 5-8 against the spread. Tampa Bay's 3-9-1. Rams 5-7-1. All these teams that were in the playoffs and thought to be going far. It's just interesting how things change that fast in the NFL. Everyone in the NFC East has been ATS, I don't want to say gold this year, but they all have positive records from an ATS standpoint in the NFC East, and not a lot of expectations for the Giants, not a lot for Washington. Dallas was a public team, but they still have covered a lot, and Philly's been great. But it's just crazy how Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, all these guys, great court, nothing. Like these guys have been poisoned against the spread this year.
No, absolutely, and it is amazing. I don't know that I've seen a season where so much has turned so quickly against such, well thought of teams and or quarterbacks. Obviously, Rodgers and Brady are two of the best who have ever slung the football. But Stafford's a good player. Again, he quarterbacked a Super Bowl winner, and that team just never really got anywhere. And again, they haven't had Stafford for the last month, but they weren't that good before that either, or weren't playing that well before that. So it is wild how quickly this has been one of the most transitional seasons I think I've seen. And with some of these teams coming up the way the NFC East has all come together basically to put all 4 teams in the playoff picture. All of a sudden the Lions are playing well, and I think it's definitely fascinating how quickly fortunes have changed for some teams and some players that we really didn't anticipate. Teams that were way high up on the Super Bowl odds board. They weren't ahead of the Bills or the Chiefs, but they were right there. Green Bay and Tampa Bay and so on. It's fascinating how this has flipped over the course of the last couple of months.
Patrick, what are you working on for this week? Obviously, we have the World Cup getting to the semifinals now, and you have the final next weekend. The Bowls are going to start this week. What are you working on for Vegas Insider?
Well, we've already got up for all the games we've discussed today. I've got the opening odds report up on VegasInsider.com right now. And as I know, that article updates all week long. It's a reverse chronological thing. So you're looking at the latest information on each game right at the top. That'll update all week long on all these key games we discussed. And this is a pretty good batch of games, I think. Pretty interesting batch of games. And then in addition, we'll continue to update what's going on with the college football playoff over the course of this week as those 2 games marinate a little bit more. Already done an update heading into these World Cup semis, which start on Tuesday. There's one Tuesday, one Wednesday, on just kind of where books stand with regard to these 4 teams and who's good and who's bad behind the counter, with 2 real upstarts in Croatia and Morocco staying alive. And you got France and Argentina. You got Messi trying to get over the hump and get that one trophy before he times out on his international soccer career. So we'll have a good bit on that. Should have some bowl stuff too. We're still working out some of it, but there's no shortage of great content from countless contributors, including yourself, at Vegas Insider right now. I've got a couple of good things up, but there's a ton of other great content, and I encourage everybody to avail themselves of all of it.
Patrick Everson, you can find him on Twitter at @PatrickE_Vegas. Always a great job covering not only the football beat, but the World Cup is coming to a close this week, and also college football. Very curious to see how some of these line movements happen with players opting out, with all this other stuff. There's so many things going on with the Bulls as well. Patrick, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next Monday.
You bet. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. That is Patrick Everson. I am Kevin Rogers. We appreciate you watching. As always, best of luck with your bets.